Hey guys, wanted to do a quick video discussing the types of grants there are out there. One of the biggest challenges in grant writing is finding the right grant to fit your need and the right grant to fit your agency. A lot of times when I'm working with first time grant writers, if someone just getting started with it, you don't shoot for the moon on the first grant proposal. There are generally a few different types of grants out there. There are federal grants, which are usually the most technical and complicated. They generally have the most uh, rules and regulations as to how they want their proposals submitted, and they have a lot of reporting requirements on the back side of those. So federal grants are usually something for the more advanced grant writer. I don't recommend that folks start out with a federal grant to begin with. Typically, you know it's a little bit too overwhelming for the first time grant writer. Okay. Then we have state grants, which are sort of similar to federal grants. They come from your individual state. Sometimes they're not as complex, but a lot of times there is a lot of complex reporting required. Sometimes there's also federal money that comes to the state, and then the state, divvies out that money. So you still have a lot of federal requirements that are, even though it's a state grant. So, it can be a lot more complex. Now, on the more simplistic side, you have foundation grants, which a lot of times they differ very drastically based on the type of foundation it is. More established foundations may have more regulations. Smaller foundations may just have, you submit a couple page narrative and a budget, and that's it. So typically, foundations are a good place to start. They usually don't have as many rules and regulations you have to go by after you get the funding as well. There's a little bit more flexibility. There's also a little bit more flexibility in the types of projects they will fund. Sometimes they'll fund things that the federal government just will not. Okay. Sometimes more edgy, cutting edge research. It takes the federal government a little while to get up with the trends. So if you have something that is new and really cool, it might be easier to get some foundation funding. There's also corporate funding. A lot of major businesses, such as car manufacturers, utility companies, a lot of big corporations have giving, corporate giving. So they call them grants sometimes. Sometimes it's a gift. But they're usually a little bit more simple to apply to, and sometimes less regulations. But the key to all of this is understanding the agency and what they want. If they say they will not fund let's say conferences. Say you want to do a conference and you need money to do your conference. If they say they won't fund conferences, it doesn't matter how convincing your narrative is, they're not going to fund it. So, you have to, read carefully and understand, what they want. But typically, overall, the moral of the story is, when you start out grant writing, start with corporate funding, start with foundations. They're a little easier. Sometimes you can gain some good data from those grants. I usually tell people you have to build your portfolio. It's a process. So you may be able to try your idea with some foundation funding, get some data, see how it's going, and then you can expand it with a federal grant, or a state grant, to build your project up. A lot of times they call those pilot projects to see, how they'll work with a small group, and then, expand it out to a larger region. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about types of funding and where your project fits. And for this class, the overall proposal, the fake proposal that you're applying to at the end is structured like a foundation. So it's not very complicated, not very complex, but the major components are there. So please let me know if you have any questions about the differences in the types of funding. Okay. Take care.